And welcome to this edition of Invest Africa. I'm Alicia Seckham. Well, according to the GSM Association, which is a trade group representing the interest of mobile operators worldwide, Africa is at present the frontier with an estimated 649 million subscribers. Tonight in studio, we're joined by some of the key players in the telecoms sector to discuss the role and opportunities of the mobile space on the continent. Joining me at desk for this half of the show is Pieter Verkade. He's MTN's Group Chief Commercial Officer, and then Arthur Goldstuck, MD for Worldwide Worx, joins our conversation as well. Welcome, gentlemen, and thanks so much for joining us today. Let's get straight into this conversation, Arthur, with you, looking at technology in the world today and specifically how it's developing on the African continent. How do you see mobile leading the change in Africa, and what role do you see it playing in developing economies at large?
It comes from two sides, and the first is the impact it makes on industry and trade in general, and the contribution it makes to economies across Africa. And in that context, you can see it almost as the new gold. It's taking over from mining, in fact, as one of the most profitable sectors, generating the highest revenues across the African continent. And then from the demand side, in terms of those who use the technology, it's probably the most empowering technology we've ever seen. That, along with the internet, will turn out to have been the technologies or the innovations that have changed the most lives for the better in the long term, especially in the developing world where people haven't had access to communications infrastructure.
Well, easy to see the incentive for the investment that MTN's made on the African continent at large, Pieter. So let's get your view on the kind of evolution we're seeing in the mobile space right now as this big player.
Yes, well, I think Africa is a very exciting place at the moment for mobile. At first, there's brought a lot of mobile communication to a lot of the rural areas where no communications were. And we're now kind of seeing the second phase of that with mobile data getting there, with financial services getting there over the mobile phone. Mm-hmm. So we see continued improvement of those products and services and continued growth as well. So we are very excited about it, and that's
You're
why
not the only ones, though, that are have identified the opportunity and looking to leverage it. So give us a assessment from your side of the competition and the competitive landscape you're facing.
Well, in general, for our industry, competition has been very good. I mean, competition drives further growth. Competition drives us to be stronger. So we are very happy to see that level of competition, because that only makes our products better, and that makes the product for the consumer better.
Arthur, that being said, how are you rating innovation right now?
I think generally speaking, because there is so much that is new all the time, the networks are able to be seen as being innovative simply by keeping up with what's currently being offered to them, what's being demanded by the consumer, and the way they're able to provide that over the ever-evolving networks. So, for example, the next version of mobile broadband will be LTE, which will eventually become 4G. And simply by being on 4G, a network is positioned as being innovative and forward-thinking. So in a way, by default, they have to be innovative.
That's absolutely critical, and I've just gotten back from Uganda. MTN making very big noises about LTE over in that space specifically right now. Pieter, talk us through the kind of strategies you've had to employ in order to tap market share, because where we're seeing, for example, a waning in terms of voice demand, a decrease in ARPU levels, you're having to make up for losses on that front in terms of gaining and raking in market share on the data side of things.
Yes, I mean, first of all, I don't think there's necessarily losses on the voice side, because we're still growing in penetration. So it's more the further we go into the market.
It's more the pace and the rate of growth.
Yes, I mean, we all got very comfortable with very large growth rates, and at one point that has to stop, because it's not unlimited. But for data, we follow very much the same structure. I mean, a big part of our success is based on our distribution and being very widely available in the market, being close to the consumer. And with data, you have to do the same. The slight complication is that there's a few more devices in play, and you need to make sure that those are available in the market. But for the rest, it's very similar to voice. Make sure that the network quality is good, and that's what drives most of our product.
Yeah, taking a look at the kind of evolution we've seen, I think it's been most prominent in the financial services space, where we've seen this collaboration between telecom players and financial services providers at large. How are you rating success right now? Because the big player in that regard has been Safaricom, and that with the launch of M-Pesa.
It depends on the country you look at. Every country is different, and that's in fact the cautionary message that I always give to anyone who wants to enter any of the markets with a mobile payment service. So M-Pesa has been massive in Kenya. It's been all but a failure in South Africa. Yes, it's picked up some customers, but nothing like what was hoped for, and nothing like the Kenya example. And the reason is very simple. It's that there wasn't such a desperate need for M-Pesa in South Africa. We have a very high banked population, and also we have a very well-developed cell phone banking environment. Kenya didn't have either of those. Also, Kenya had compared to South Africa, a lax regulatory environment in which it was possible to provide a financial money transfer service without having a banking license. In South Africa, you can't do that. So Vodacom had to team up with Nedbank, for example. Nedbank provided the service only through their branch network initially. So both of those, in fact, were major obstacles to the take-up of M-Pesa in this country. But the bottom line is the needs of every country are different. So a different kind of mobile payments or mobile financial service has to be introduced in South Africa. And in fact, we've had that since 2005. We've had cell phone banking in this country, and it's a great success story.
Yeah, where copy-paste models don't necessarily work, Pieter. I mean, just how do you approach investing when MTN moves into these various territories, and how flexible do you have to be in your business model?
Very flexible the business model, very standard on the actual infrastructure, because that allows us to roll us out. But if it is on mobile money, and we do see a big growth in East Africa indeed. So Kenya, but also our MTN Uganda is done incredibly well, and it's probably transacting more money than most of the banks in Uganda. Rwanda is doing well, Zambia is doing well. So East Africa generally is picking up. We recently launched in South Africa in a slightly different model and much more geared towards a banked population, and there we're now seeing with a different model, very good take-up over the last 3-4 months. In West Africa it has been very slow as well, and there it has been more the bill payments who have been driving the growth rather than the money remittance. But also there we see Côte d'Ivoire picking up, we see Ghana picking up. So it is a product which will succeed. It's just there's different ways of entering the market and getting there.
Just how cost competitive does the infrastructure and what you have access to allow you to be?
Well, our business is all about scale, unfortunately, and for us size does matter. So the bigger we are, the better we can purchase all our equipment, and if we want to go so far into the countries, we need to do it on a low cost basis, because that's why the banks have never been able to get there. So we're leveraging our existing infrastructure, our existing distribution network, and that's how we're able to launch these kind of services at very low cost. What's
your assessment when it comes to, Arthur, the kind of stride we're making in addressing the affordability issue on the continent? Because affordability being adequately addressed with Africa's broadband investments has been a strong focus point, and high capacity broadband projects have been rolled out across the continent. To what effect?
It's a very interesting question, because what I'm not seeing in many countries is the competition that you would expect to be sparked by that kind of rollout of broadband. Where the competition is the most intensive is in Kenya, and that's where the prices have come down the most dramatically. The problem with that, of course, is that margins are razor thin, so it becomes a very let's call it challenging environment for the networks to operate in, but it's essential for the networks to be able to not only compete with each other, but to make their services affordable to the broadest base of individuals possible. And that's where I feel in South Africa in particular, the networks haven't quite come to the party in terms of making broadband access accessible to the poorest of the poor, who could benefit from data services on their cell phones. And I'll put that in context very quickly. Yeah. The standard rate for out-of-bundle use of data in South Africa on a mobile network is R1 per megabyte, and that is still highly expensive.
What's impeding that ability? What stands as a big challenge for a player like yourselves?
Well, it's a couple of things. First of all, it's the transmission capability. So South Africa has always been, or not South Africa, Africa has always been hampered by lack of connectivity. Because it's one thing to have a very fast antenna and pick up a data signal, but if you can't bring that first of all to the base, to the switch, and then outside, because most of the servers are based in Europe or in the US, you still have a very low speed. The other thing is the devices. A lot of the lower income segments still use very, very basic devices where data capability is still very limited. And at the moment we're pushing a lot of those device upgrades and trying to find very local smartphones and slightly better feature phones so that we can start driving that and can start looking at the prepaid market as the next growth market for data.
Well, let's leave it there with you for today. Pieter, thanks so much for having joined us. Time for a quick break. We say goodbye to MTN's Group Chief Commercial Officer, Pieter Verkade. And after the break, we're joined by Damoye Oyesiku, who's a managing partner at Moytel Consultants from Lagos, Nigeria. Also with us in studio is Willie Oosthuysen. He's the Chief Strategic and Chief Technology Officer over at Altech. So don't go away.